Okay, super. Then we can start the presentation. So on the schedule for today, there's of course a small introduction on who is exactly Belfius and yeah, where are we located in the company, and then we move on to yeah, the more specific ambitions of Belfius, both on yeah, ambitions as a company as well as our data ambitions, which are also we have to place that in the regulatory context on data. There's quite a hefty regulatory context that we have to take into account. So we'll also share a bit of details on that. And all those ambitious and context that resulted in the design of our data platform, which we will then also give a small intro to, because it's of course a very long and hefty subject, which we are always happy to talk about. And specifically for today, we will do a small zoom on our data ingestion and virtualization layer, and we'll also share a bit of details on our corporate data model. So who is Belfius? Belfius is a Belgian bank insurer, which we are very proud of. There is a very big customer base that we have. We have over 3.6 million customers, and over 2/3 of those are active users of our Belfius app, which is one of the things we are, of course, as Belfius also very proud of. It was nominated as the best app in the world of the major bankers last year. So that's, of course, an achievement that we are very proud of, and we're happy to share and show off when we talk about Belfius. Belfius is also a very it is a good sized company. There is over 9,000 employees, and there is 590 and it's almost 600 branches all over Belgium. So Belfius is really anchored into our Belgian society, and that's also why our tagline of the company is, of course, Belfius, meaningful and inspiring for the Belgian society together. So that is really who we are as Belfius. Now, I said Belfius, we all know Belfius probably as the bank, but we are a Belgian bank insurer, so there is certainly a very important insurance aspect to Belfius. And if we do a small zoom in on that, then there's actually, there is one insurer, Belfius Insurers, but there's 3 brands that are part of our Belfius Insurance as a company. And the first one, the Belfius Insurers logo is very tied to Belfius as a bank. We leverage, we serve insurance to the Belfius customers, and we of course leverage on the very good Belfius mobile app that we have there. And we're able to provide a very strong digital experience, both in the underwriting as in the claim process for the Belfius customers. Next to that, we have DVV Insurance, which is also a very well-known brand in Belfius. It is over 19 years old, and it has a very strong local embedding. It's a bit more of a phygital strategy, where we, with Belfius Insurance, maybe to our bank customers, leverage very much on the Belfius mobile app. With DVV, we have a more phygital strategy, and we also have our DVV agent, who is close to the customer, which is also a very important part of the brand identity for DVV. And DVV itself is, again, not a small company. There's over 350,000 families that are insured with DVV. So that's we touch a lot of the Belgian people with our DVV brand. And then the third brand that we have is Corona Direct. It's a direct insurer, so that means that there is no one in between the insurance company and the actual customer. We have a somewhat unique offering at Corona Direct with our kilometer insurance and our volume insurance for house owners. And also for the people of the mall who are following that. I'm sure you remember the small commercial about the dog insurance that was always part of the mall. So that's also Corona Direct, of course. Now, so Belfius is quite a big company. We have, on the one hand, our Belfius Bank, and then on the other side, we have our Belfius Insurance, and we had those 2 brands, DVV and Corona. Now, Corona itself is a bit more far away located from Belfius Insurance, in the sense that Corona has their own IT, which is governed by the Corona. But DVV and Belfius Insurance, they share their IT departments. So if we look at Belfius, when we speak about Belfius, we typically mean Belfius as a Belfius bank and Belfius insurance with the DVV included. And to serve and to help those two entities, we have the IT transversal services where both Wouter and me are part of in the architecture team. And there was already a small introduction about who's who from Wouter and Peter. So I'll not dive too deep into that, but I will say, of course, that Wouter is the head of our data and integration team within architecture. So he's really the driver behind the whole data strategy that we're giving a glimpse of today. Voila, over to you, Wouter.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And I'm going not to go into detail on your doctoral titles, etc. But you joined Belfius, and which we are very happy to that you have joined also in my team and the enterprise architecture team in summer of last year. And your focus really within the team lies within the domain of analytics, data science, and AI in a very broad sense. To speak of. Okay, and if we then dive deeper into our Belfius strategy, and what is, if you see the tagline Belfius meaningful and inspiring for the Belgian society together, then this has been translated by our top management, and it's carried within the company, where we really want to emphasize that we want to be very high on the ranking with the digital. So we want to really to be a digital leader and striving to a human digital excellence, meaning that the experience of our customer and also our employee in a digital aspect needs to be top notch. We have a constant focus on what the customers really want, and we want to build on the trust that they have in us as a company. We are currently reinventing banking and insurance, because what we typically did was much less personalized advice, and right now what we want to do is really personalize things and through hyper personalization, and also give them meaningful and inspiring insights through specific programs that we run through our mobile apps. Of course, safety, privacy, and trust by design is very high on the agenda for us as well, because as a bank insurer, you really need to have this as basically the top one priority when it comes to data. And of course, our processes need to be very, very efficient if we want to be a top-notch digital leader. And there we aim for straight-through processing first, everything data supported, and hopefully AI-enabled where applicable. And if we then look into what we have as a Belfius strategy and how we translate that, those ambitions into ambitions for Belfius data, is that where we want to switch from batch-based data operations to real-time data integration. So it's not because you work with a closure of a day, etc., that you not can work with your customer in a real-time manner. We want to enable processing of new types of data, as already brought in or announced in the very beginning of the presentation by Mark. It's that there are numerous different new types of data from internal sources, but also external sources that need to be taken into account whenever we're working with our customer, and also trying to give them meaningful insight on what they are doing and how they can actually work more efficient or work more efficient with the bank and the insurance. Okay, what we also want to do is we want to harmonize our tooling landscape, because it's very diverse. It's a gigantic, and Peter will go more in detail on that, but the area is actually quite gigantic and requires quite a lot of tooling and a way of working in the group, so that we can use and reuse skills transversely and specialize if necessary. So that is really something that we want to strive for. Okay, so very important for us as well is that all data that we expose to our customer and that we receive from our customers is governed and secured via our corporate data model. So the corporate data model is for us, it's really the language that we want to speak internally within Belfius IT and business, so that we actually share a common ground and a common nomenclature between all of the partners in IT development. And then, okay, we're looking for end-to-end stacks as well for reporting, AI analytics, and decisioning, so that we actually can put the business users in the driver's seat. So where we actually want to enable the business to be really the driver, or the user really is the most important part in reporting, AI analytics, and decisioning. So it's really on that emphasis that we're started off with the whole data strategy. And if we then look into what it really means, safety, privacy, and trust, as this is really for us a cornerstone in the corporate data platform design, is that we have a commitment towards our customers. We want to satisfy and give them a good feeling of trust. And it's always the first on top of our mind. So we have a very high concern on the safety of the customer's data. We respect our customers' privacy through the privacy statements that we made out, and really that's a commitment. We are not going to sell data, so to say, to an external party, or misuse data by combining things we shouldn't be combining, because we also have to respect a very firm regulatory context. And GDPR, it's on everybody's list. I think we need to protect our customers' personal data at all cost. Okay, and if we didn't then even go step one deeper, is that the security of our customer data, that's our first concern, and respecting the regulatory context. Of course, Belfius, as a Belgian bank insurer, has to comply with all the Belgian and European directives, including the things from National Bank and the European Bank, so that we actually handle all of these things properly. And we also have adhere to very specific reporting legislation, such as Solvency II, IFRS 17, etc. And also AML is very high, so, and the anti-money laundering models is very high on the agenda. The European, when it comes to the regulatory context, of course, number one is GDPR legislation, and also with the whole thing that we're trying to do is actually moving a lot of data towards the cloud, but there Schrems 2 throws an extra curveball, and we need to look into how will we do that in the future. And this is also something that a very hot topic for the moment, on how will we actually evolve our corporate data platform outside of the Belfius on-premises installations. Okay, and similarly to GDPR, there is also GDPR started off not as a regulation, but more as a framework and guidelines. Also a new legislation is coming up, and that's the European AI Framework Guidelines, which most likely within a year or two will become also a legislation like GDPR. Okay, so, and then what is the corporate data platform in itself? So if you look at the past, that's where we had a lot of different legislations coming up, and at first it looked very good. So we had our core systems which were feeding our analytical systems, and we needed to do some transformations in order to do that, and we could firmly centralize all that. But with coming of new legislation, this whole principle a bit was left behind because of most of the time pressure, because you get a new legislation that comes up within a year and a half, you need to comply, and then you start to take shortcuts, and then the spaghetti emerges. So then all of a sudden you have transformations all over the place, feedback loops that go into from your analytical systems, go back into your operational systems, moving back in a daily batch to your analytical systems, and then you have a whole cycle that becomes apparent, and that actually slows down all of your analytical calculations necessary for reporting, and also it becomes very hard to do top-notch give top-notch customer experience, and automate a lot of the insights and the bannering, etc. So in that sense, we said, okay, we need to do some clean up, some rationalization, so we can actually go into a new and a future target, which is for us the corporate data platform in a Belfius Together context, where we actually ingrain security, where we ingrain quality checks, where we ingrain also the data governance on top of it. So, and that's where we actually say we need to move out the calculation engines from our data storage solution. But of course, when you do a calculation, you're very interested in that, in the results of those calculations, and that means we have a feedback loop between the calculation engine and the corporate data platform, which then serves in itself as the source for our operational core banking solutions or operational core insurance solutions. And as we use it also in our operations, it also becomes quite straightforward to actually align the things that you use in operations and you do in analytics, and the analytical reporting area also consumes the data from the corporate data platform in itself. Okay, so if you say what we want to do, what is our evolution now, moving towards a corporate data platform, is that we want to position the one corporate data platform instead of multiple fragmented data warehouses. So we can avoid data redundancy and inconsistencies between the different data warehouses. Also, different implementations mean different transformations. Different transformation mean that you have used different definitions, and meaning that it becomes very hard to actually do reconciliation between the different systems. What we also want to do is we want to really focus on real-time integration and analytical process from the start, so that we can actually generate insights for operational processes, which means that we can real-time or near real-time do fraud analytics, use the same calculation engine or similar platforms for dynamic pricing, customer next best offers and next best action activities, etc. Why do we say we need to have multiple calculation engines? Because for us, a single calculation engine is actually the running model. It's a running model, but of course we want to limit the number of calculation engine platforms, meaning that whenever we make a choice for a calculation engine platform, it needs to be reusable for other use cases as well. What also is an advantage by using multiple calculation engine is that, and the modeling, you can give the modeling in itself, not the runtime platform, but the modeling, the creation of the model, the analytical insight is actually something that we can hand over towards the business. And they own the data and the analytical models, and IT in their turn manage the platform, or the platforms, better said. What we would like to become for any referential data, meaning master data and reference data, we would like to become the only source for data in the corporate data platform, meaning that we build a system of reference and that we keep our system of record aside, but feeds the corporate data platform in respect. And also what we would like to do is we have some end user computing reporting and calculation engines, which are hard to actually industrialize and govern. That's also an ambition to actually give them a stable platform which they can actually consume and which is properly governed and plugged onto the CDP.
All right.
Now,
so
Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Arthur. So when we then dive a bit deeper on how does that corporate data platform look, and we made some conceptual drawings of the data platform, and the most high level figure that we can make is the one here on the slide. And a lot of times, at first, when people look at it, they're a bit confused, because it's not the traditional conceptual image they might have expected. But for us, there's quite some important decisions behind the corporate data platform that you already see on this very high level drawing. And the first one is our data platform, the storage, exposure, and consumption. You see that it's really sandwiched in between two very important blocks. We already said it in the previous slides, but it's really the top of mind concern for us, and that is the identity and access management, the security of all our data. And on top of that, we have a bit cryptic our transversal data functions. We'll in the next slide we'll see a bit more what that is, but you can already think of data governance will be a very important one, non-transversal data functions, and you can see that they really encompass the entire data platform. And the three main areas that we have there is data storage, data exposure, and data consumption. And one of the questions we get a lot is what happened to data ingestion? Because of course you have typically have your operational systems, and then you ingest your data into the data warehouse. Well, for us conceptually they're all part of the data storage. You'll see that in the next slide. So that's already a good one to note. And then secondly, that data exposure layer, which is something we introduced quite a few years ago into our architecture. And for us, it's really a big enabler. Why? Because having that block in between data storage and data consumption, you decouple the connection between our consumers and the storage. What we will say is, well, that all the consumers, it can be an engine, it can be reporting, whatever, they will talk to the data exposure layer, and the data exposure layer in turn will talk to the data storage. And that really means that we can actually make the data storage transparent to our data consumers, and that allows us really the flexibility we need to complete our move to the cloud, and so on, in a very flexible manner without impacting the consumers very much. Of course, might always be a bit impact, but putting that exposure layer in between really reduces the impact on the consumers and allows us to really flexibly move, make steps towards the cloud or not on one port, be it storage or the consumption, without immediately impacting the other one as well. So the next layer, and then you've all of a sudden see a lot of blocks appearing. Of course, our data ecosystem is enormous. There is the enormous areas that happen with data. Data touches really everything. So our next layer, we try to again conceptualize the things a bit, and as I said, you have EM on the bottom, which is our bedrock, and our transversal data functions with compliance and auditing and data governance on top, of course. And then on our data storage, as I said, ingestion, we see that as a part of our data storage. We have our data in our applications, and it can immediately be exposed if necessary, or it can be ingested in the typical analytical storage. You can think of the data lake and the data warehouses and so on, or our operational data hubs as well. And then on the right side, of course, we have our data consumption. There is a lot of attention. You also see it really in the amount of blocks that there are to everything that is analytical and reporting. We have both our decision engines and our calculation engines, and we have a very important block next to that, which is our model lifecycle. And as I said, or Wouter said before, we really want to enable the business to take ownership of the data and the models, and where IT takes a step back and manages the platforms. But that also means that you really need to put a lifecycle stack next to that to give the business a bit of vision, to allow them to do the development of the models or the reporting. But then at the same time, you also need to ensure the quality and the stability of your IT environment. So that means putting in place that entire lifecycle stack, and that business can go through the necessary testing, that they can do the versioning, and they can deploy, for example, through a CI/CD pipeline, their models, and also monitor those models themselves. Now, the main focus at the moment at Belfius is really around the data virtualization, which is a very big enabler to even strengthen even more our EM and data governance, and as I said, to put in place those life cycles to really enable the business. Now, at the same time, we're doing that, of course, in our on-premise as well, but we're also moving towards the cloud. So we're doing both things at the same time a bit. It's renovating the house that we have on-prem and building at the same time a new house in the cloud that matches our entire framework and really realizes that ambitions. And it's really because we do this both on-prem and in the cloud that the data exposure area with the data virtualization that Wouter will talk about later is very important, because it allows us to make steps in one of the blocks or in one of the areas towards the cloud without really having to move the entire platform at the same time. Now, we really do not have the time to go into all of the toolings that we have at Belfius. I selected a few main ones or very big ones, both at bank and insurance. What we have on the data storage side, we have of course, the typical storage technologies as DB2 and Oracle. To do our ingestion and to manage a bit of the transformations, there we have both have SAS and Qlik, which are very important vendors that we have in-house, or technologies that we in-house have, and we're also making steps with VoltSpeed, mostly in the cloud. Now, about Qlik, Wouter will talk a bit about that later in the presentation, together with TIBCO data virtualization, which is the solution we chose to do data virtualization. On the side of data consumption, a few things that are interesting to mention is that for our calculation engine, we are looking towards the cloud, where the two main solutions are Azure Machine Learning and Databricks. And for decision engines, we currently have Red Hat and IBM ODM or JRules, as it was previously called. Now, for the reporting, again, we said we have quite some toolings in-house. So at the moment, we have SAS and Qlik in-house, and we are looking also a bit towards Power BI to see how we can make the transition. Now, the final thing that I want to say, I already mentioned the model lifecycle. We have put in place a stack on-premise to do that model lifecycle management, to really allow our business to develop Python models and to put them in production. We use open source software for that in a part, so typically MLflow, and then also Dash, for example, for the monitoring. But we're also looking towards the cloud, and it's probably one of the things that will move quickly to the cloud, because we really see the value of moving towards the cloud and having all the capabilities that are possible there in the cloud. All right, so I think, Wouter, you can share a bit more of information about Qlik.
Yep. I'll unmute myself. So thank you very much, Peter. But as previously mentioned, Qlik Replicate is for us a key element and is our main ingestion tooling, meaning that this is for us really a cornerstone in our architecture. Because what we did is we are feeding our data warehouse for Belfius Insurance through Qlik Replicate. What we did is we we had IBM CDC before, and within 2 months' time, we actually shifted from IBM CDC towards Qlik Replicate in a very smooth and very straightforward manner. Almost all operational database tables are now replicated in real time, meaning that actually the moment that a transaction happens on the source side, actually it's already available in our ODS, in our staging area for our data warehouse within a couple of seconds. So also what we use Qlik Replicate for is to feed our Belfius Bank data hubs. The data hubs is really for us the cornerstone in the becoming the corporate data platform becoming the system of reference for all master and referential data. So here what we do is we also replicate the source OLTP databases towards Oracle, and our main databases there are DB2 and Oracle, and we have a replication delay time there averaging between 1.14 seconds during business hours, with a 99.65% of time below replication, with a timing below 5 seconds. Meaning this is very, very much or very, very quick in the replications. And we have quite a lot of new use cases planned. What we want to do is we want to bring also into Data Vault 2 modeling into our data warehouse solutions, and this means that we don't want to program that all ourselves. We want to automate as much as possible, and it was already mentioned by Peter. And also, what we want to do is make sure that if we have to replicate data towards Azure, because Azure is our main target in the cloud, that's where we actually feed the Azure-based data storage. Let it be for analytical purposes or maybe even for operational purposes. And right now we have a really good collaboration with Qlik and Microsoft to help solve our challenges, because what we've seen is that Qlik already implemented several new IDs from which we brought into the solution into their new releases, which is also giving an idea on how willing that Qlik is, and maybe also how good our IDs were and reusable for other customers. So if we then dive deeper into data virtualization, where we've chosen TIBCO data virtualization as a solution, and if we explain, or if I give a high-level view on the concept of data virtualization here, it's really data virtualization in itself is actually a way to connect to all of your potential sources. You combine that in a data model, and that's where our CDM actually kicks in, and then you publish real-time data service to be used in for any kind of purpose. Let it be enterprise applications or through ESB API integrations, or maybe even your reporting and BI. And as we do, also our mobile app is actually consuming data in real time on our data virtualization platform. So it's what are the key characteristics of data virtualization? It gives you really easy access to all data that you actually connect. It's not just by magic that it happens. You need, of course, to connect to your data, but it gives you a virtual data layer, meaning that all your data can be combined in a single model. You minimize the need for data replication. Of course, in some cases, there are really use cases where you need to replicate, because it's never a good idea to actually mix operational and analytical load on the same machine, so to say, or on the same hardware, because of of the different natures of your queries. You can optimize your performance really strongly in a single in a single instance. It's real time. Actually, we need to change it. It's the right time. It's the moment you need the data. When you query it, it's available. So it's the moment you query, that you ask the question to your data virtualization platform. Actually, it uses all of its technologies and knowledge to actually connect and refer that query to the correct source, and maybe even combine that data into a single result set. Your data services that you publish are real-time and reusable. At least that's for us, that's the aim. We don't want to make data services bespoke for a single integration. We really want to create reusable data services. And also it gives you lighter and more flexible integrations, because it's a Swiss Army knife of connectors. It can connect to any kind of source you can imagine, basically. And it integrates very well with existing tools on the consumption side. So it exposes itself as a virtual database, meaning that through standard query language or SQL, you actually can reach a myriad of different sources, even if it's not something which is queryable by nature, like XML, or maybe even an LDAP source, or documents in a broader sense. Okay. So
Wouter,
if we,
I would suggest maybe to skip this slide for the sake of timing.
okay, for me it's fine, but it's yeah, good. Okay, and then as I mentioned it already before, our corporate data model, which is our Belfius tailor-made Esperanto, as we call it, is the ubiquitous language that we use within Belfius, and we are supporting the data governance and the API integration strategy with it. Before, we didn't have any corporate data model. We were very silo-based when we managed the data, including yeah, the different, or not the potential, but including different interpretations of the data definitions and replicated data. And only physical data model existed before, or were maintained regularly and very scrupulously, because they are really the basis for our data models in our operational and analytical databases. And they are really required to manipulate the structure of that database. What we want to do now or in the near future, because we're still implementing, of course, so it's not a never-ending journey. We hope to be finished with the journey in the course of this and next year. But of course, we want to introduce a single common language, one definition per term. And if we have multiple definitions on a term, we really want to contextualize those definitions. Also, what we want to have is clear ownership and stewardship on those corporate data model elements. And across the different business line, we want to be aligned to the business capabilities and not only or not the application any longer, because what we had first is that we were siloed because of the data was in an application managed. That application was managed by a certain team, a certain business unit was responsible of it, and they understood the data, but there was no clear glossary or overview or dictionary where you could find what data was actually in there, what it really meant in the eyes of the beholder of the application. And also we want to use that corporate data model as our canonical language in our API definitions, so that we can avoid point-to-point integrations and offer basically within Belfius data as a service. Okay, so if we then go on and state, okay, what are our what have we learned from going into this? Our best practices, and it's we use a saying. It's like changing an oil tanker to a speedboat. That's what we are doing, because moving from batch to real time, whilst making it run on solar energy. So we are actually changing the engines. And also we want to be able to keep on delivering the oil, because the oil was required by the end user yesterday. And it's really it's a really hefty challenge. You really need to change people's minds, their mindset, and also the technologies at the same time, and this requires quite a lot of change management. So explaining the why and how of the entire ecosystems takes continuous effort, and I do it on a daily basis, basically, where I try and explain the whole corporate data model and corporate data platform philosophy, because it's really required to understand that, so you can the people can adopt it more easily. This is not something I or anybody can do on its own. You need to have a group of champions that actually, our ambassadors, that actually help you spread out the message within the company, because it requires quite a lot of my time, and it's a heavy duty. What we also did was we created a Pathfinders team to lead the way. That's why we chose the name Pathfinders. So because many first-time technical issues appear, and you always have the vendors stating, yeah, it should be straightforward like this and straightforward like that, but still you need to find a way of working, a modus operandi for yourself, and you need to make sure that you can overcome the technical issues that a developer has in connecting to a certain solution or in implementing a certain integration. So really dedicate staff for that with a clear mandate and time to solve it, because it's not something that you can pick up in day-to-day work and day-to-day project work as well. We have learned this the hard way, because it's not that easy to actually convince people that they need to wait for a certain way of working, because if you do that, they all start working in legacy, and because they have to deliver tomorrow. Also, start with the basics. And if you start with the basics, do the basics that really bring business value. So what we did also was, for instance, like in data governance, we started with setting up our glossary, defining things so that it's understood and not misinterpreted by people who are implementing solutions, but also people who are designing or dreaming up solutions. Because in most of the time, the business is dreaming about something, they want to have it tomorrow, and the designers didn't understand what they were talking about because they talk a totally different language. That's where we stated, okay, it will give us an enormous amount of value that we can understand each other. And if we don't understand each other, we can look it up. And that's where we did some heavy investments in our data glossary and CDM implementations. And also, data touches everything. Please try and avoid changing everything, because you have seen that this is a ginormous or gigantic landscape. Don't change everything at the same time. Make sure that you can decouple things. That's why we really emphasize that layer of decoupling between storage and consumption, because otherwise, if you need to change and storage and your consumption layer and the language that you're using within your consumption layers, it's going to be a no-go. You will never ever get this functioning. Okay, so we're very happy to discuss with you. If you have any questions related on topics we didn't touch on today or topics we did touch today, we would like to hear it from you. I've seen that there were a couple of questions coming during the presentation.